If you produce, mix, and master music, you know that the loudness wars have been going on for about as long as people have been making this a profession. But there is a fine line between sounding good and being too loud, and sounding good and being too quiet. So there are a few ways to make your mixes sound louder without crushing them too much or getting them to distort. And one of the tools we are going to be using is compression. If you do anything with compression at all, you are going to want to download my free Mom in the Car compression checklist, which basically goes through every single knob on a compressor and uses Mom in the Car as an analogy for this specific tool. You can print it off and hang it somewhere in your studio, or you can just take a screenshot and save it to your phone. Either way, it's super helpful and it makes you think and use compression in a different way than you never have before. So let's jump on into the DAW, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways to get your mixes to sound louder and competitive, so that way you're not giving your audience a whiplash effect when they listen to your music on their playlists. All right, so here I have a pretty decent sized session that I'm doing for my church. And before we do anything else, there is one thing that matters more than everything else on this list. That's why I called it step 0. So there's technically 4 steps to get mixes to sound louder. But step 0 is more important than 1, 2, and 3. You need to make sure that your peak volume is hitting -4 to -6. You need to leave headroom on your master bus. And don't touch this fader and turn it down. Leave it at unity. Make sure that everything that you're mixing going into your master bus is at a decent level. So here, let's turn everything off here. My voice is going to get a little bit quieter, but that's fine. So now let's make sure that we are hitting at a safe level. The only thing I have here on my master bus is the plugin I use to get my audio to you guys so you can hear it, and then a level meter. That is it. So man, I am really setting myself pretty stinking low, and that is a good thing. -4 to -6 is a sweet spot, but that's a sweet spot for peaks. Don't ever let it go above -4 to -6. If you can bring it to -10, that is perfect. You need to leave yourself as much headroom on your master bus as you possibly can, so that way step 1, 2, and 3 don't get in the way of getting louder mixes. This is why everybody's mixes distort. They don't give themselves enough headroom on their master bus. This is the most important thing you could do. So step number 1 is, at the very least, you have to have a limiter on your master bus. What this does is it makes sure that nothing gets any louder than where you have it set at. And my ceiling for here is at a -0.3. And the reason I do a -0.3 instead of a -0.1 is I'm giving myself just a little bit more headroom for smaller speakers like Google Homes, your phone speakers, and things that will distort at a little bit less than true unity. So as you throw the limiter on your master bus, you just turn up the gain, make sure that your ceiling is set at a decent level until you start hitting the peak volumes that you were looking for. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like with the limiter off and then on again. I'm literally just bringing everything up and making sure that nothing gets louder than my peak ceiling. This is where step 2 comes in. We want to add compression to our master bus, and we want to be careful with how much we're actually going on this. We don't want a whole bunch. We just kind of want to bring this down just a little bit. Between 1 and 3 is a really good sweet spot. You don't want to hit it too hard. You just kind of want to glue everything together. Have your attack and release somewhat at a decent level. I actually have the audio button on for the release here, and then the attack is kind of slow. And what this does is it brings everything up and then also pushes down some of these super loud parts. So everything's kind of a little bit more compressed. And because of the slower attack, we are actually kind of helping increase our perceived loudness, because the original attack of like the kick drum and the bass hits and stuff like that will come through, and then it compresses down just a little bit. This is why that checklist is really, really handy, because it gives you a different way of thinking about compression. You want to feel it more than you actually want to hear it. So now with our limiter on, we are also going to turn the compressor on and off. See, I'm just kind of hitting like -1 there, really just kind of touching a little bit, but then I'm also pushing it up with the makeup gain. That really makes things sound a lot louder, and that really helps with our perceived volume. Let me take the makeup gain back down to 0 dB. So now I'm not making this any louder at all. I am only compressing. Let's take a listen. See how it actually sounds a little bit louder? And it's not. In fact, it's actually a bit quieter because I'm compressing things down. Why is that? That is perceived loudness. You're essentially tricking your ears and tricking your speakers to give you headroom in both areas. I'm technically turning this down by 1 dB with the compression, but yet it still sounds louder. So now for gain staging and going through the rest of the plugins, I just kind of brought this back up. Gave myself a little bit, well, actually put it back to 5. I just want a little bit more volume after the compression to put into some of my other plugins. A compressor really pushes everything up to where you want it to go and gives you that perceived loudness that you're looking for. So now, number 3, you want to mess around with EQs. If you bring everything up and everything's louder, that's great, but sometimes you want the high end to be boosted just a little bit more, or maybe you should just cut a little bit of the low end and clear things up. And so that's why I have an infinity EQ here, and I'm cutting right around 100. I notice there's just a little bit of mud, and I am hitting about -1.3 dB on that. I also have another EQ here where I'm doing small little moves to boost certain areas that I'm looking for. So now let's take a listen to this EQ on and off. See how it's a little bit brighter and it's got a little bit more of a tighter low end. They are small little changes, but when you add all of these together, it makes a really big difference. I had one more EQ where I was cutting a little bit of the low end there. There was just some stuff that was making it muddy. And so then stacking all 3 of these EQs on makes it sound like this. Making your mixes sound louder matters to a certain point, but don't get carried away with this and don't let this hold you back from making great music and getting it out there. If you want that checklist, just click the link in the description and download it for free. Print it off somewhere and hang it in your studio, or just take a screenshot of it and save it on your phone. It really helps you look at compression in a different light, and maybe you'll start to feel it more than you will hear it. Let me know in the comments, what do you do to make your mixes sound louder? Now, as always, go create.